Sometimes the pain doesn't come from enemies, but from those you thought were family. She sacrificed everything for her loved ones, and in return, she received betrayal, theft, and a broken home. But as you'll find out, that's not what happens in this story. Stay tuned. The ending is worth every second. At last, she felt the weight lift from her chest. The kind of burden that quietly builds up over years and suddenly evaporates in a moment of clarity. From now on, her parents would be living with her. No more distance, no more regrets. And yet, standing on the very lot where her childhood home once stood, there was her husband, glaring at the empty space like he had conquered something. "Hurry up and bring the inheritance into our house," he said abruptly. Natalie Brooks froze mid-step, her keys still in hand. "What did you just say? Are you deaf?" he snapped. "You heard me." The absurdity of it made her laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was the kind of moment where the only thing more ridiculous than the words themselves was the fact that he actually meant them. Her in-laws, Kevin and Marlene, stood off to the side, puzzled, brows furrowed like they had just missed the punchline to a bad joke. She looked them dead in the eye. "You all don't get it, do you?" And just like that, the truth started pouring out. Her name was Natalie Brooks, born and raised in a quiet neighborhood just outside Cincinnati, Ohio. Her parents, Diane and Russell, were both office workers, routine 9-to-5ers who never missed a mortgage payment and always paid their taxes on time. They weren't rich, they weren't flashy, but they were good, honest people who raised Natalie and her younger brother Thomas to believe that hard work, kindness, and family came first. At 30, Natalie married Carter, a charming but sometimes arrogant only child whose idea of compromise was choosing which steakhouse they'd eat at. They had 2 kids, Ryan and Melissa, and for years Natalie threw herself into being the perfect mom. But while she was juggling school drop-offs and late-night fevers, something else happened. Life fast-forwarded. Now, at 54, the kids were grown, Ryan in Seattle launching his own tech startup, Melissa a paralegal in Boston. Natalie had barely noticed how fast it all flew by. She'd lost her job during the 2008 recession and never quite made it back. Her days were now quieter, filled with long walks, phone calls with her daughter, and the occasional glass of wine before bed. It wasn't glamorous, but she was content. Until that winter morning. A phone call. Her father had been in a fatal car crash. He was 82, healthy, full of life, sharp as ever, and now gone. Just like that, the grief hit her family like a sledgehammer. Her mother, Diane, all but shut down. She stopped eating, speaking only in brief murmurs. "I'm not hungry," she kept saying. "I just don't want anything." At first, Natalie and Thomas thought it was normal grief. But within 3 weeks, Diane had lost nearly 20 pounds. Alarmed, Natalie took her to the hospital, where the doctor delivered the gut punch. Late-stage pancreatic cancer. No chance of surgery. Prognosis: a year at best. It was the second time in a month Natalie had to face the reality of losing a parent. Only this time she wasn't allowed to fall apart. Her brother couldn't help. He lived in Denver with a full-time job and 3 kids of his own. So it fell on her. Natalie told Carter she needed her mother to move in. She couldn't let her go through this alone. But his reaction was, well, let's just say it wasn't what she'd hoped for. "We just buried your dad," Carter said with a sigh. "And now your mom's moving in? What next? Your whole family." Natalie stared at him. "That's my mother, Carter. Why can't she just stay in a care facility or something? Do we really need to turn our lives upside down for this?" Let me pause right here. What would you do if your partner said something like that? Could you stay silent? Or would you explode? Natalie didn't explode. She offered a compromise. "What if I stayed at her house for a while, just until things settled down?" He scoffed. "And who's going to cook for me? Do the laundry? Clean the house?" She said she'd still handle it, somehow. But the truth was, she knew things wouldn't be the same. She was no longer willing to sacrifice everything just to keep Carter's ego cushioned and his dinners hot. Carter eventually gave a stiff nod and muttered, "Fine, but this is temporary." His agreement came wrapped in arrogance, but Natalie didn't argue. She thanked him, biting her tongue. After all, he had said yes, even if it wasn't out of kindness. And so, the three of them, Natalie, Carter, and her ailing mother Diane, moved into the old Brooks family home. The place had been sitting quiet since her father's passing. Dusty, a little worn, but still full of warmth and memories. Originally, Natalie and Carter had lived in a house provided by his employer in Columbus. Rent was low, just under $1,000 a month, and the location was convenient. Carter's parents had insisted they live nearby. Being their only child, he was their entire legacy. The arrangement worked. But now, moving into Natalie's family home meant no rent, more space, and the chance to be near her roots again. To Natalie, it felt right. To Carter, it felt like losing control. He never said it outright, but Natalie saw it in his eyes. This wasn't what he signed up for. And yet, life had a way of testing people, didn't it? Now let me ask you, if you were in Carter's shoes, would you have reacted the same way? And if you were Natalie, would you have handled it differently? This is just the beginning of her story, but already, the lines between loyalty and resentment were starting to blur. Living together under one roof had turned into something far more difficult than Natalie ever expected. Carter had kept his promise. He didn't help with anything. Not a single dish washed. Not a single pill handed to her mother. But despite that, Natalie held on to one small truth that kept her going. She was able to be with her mom in the final stretch of her life. Her mother, Diane, though full of spirit on the surface, was often too weak to leave her bed. Some days she would sit up and smile. Most days she lay still, drained from the illness eating away at her. Natalie prepared her meals, helped her eat, monitored her medications, and made sure she was as comfortable as possible. There was no way Diane could have done it alone. "I'm so sorry you have to go through all this, Natalie. But thank you," her mother often whispered. "You being here, it means everything. And thank Carter, too." Diane didn't know what Carter had really been saying behind closed doors. She had no idea how cold and bitter he'd been since they moved in. She thought he was being helpful, too. That hurt Natalie even more. One night, after Diane had gone to bed, Natalie and Carter sat down for dinner. She tried to talk, just talk about how exhausting the past few months had been. How caring for her mother was draining but worth it. How maybe, just maybe, she could use a little support. Carter set his fork down and looked at her like she had just asked him to climb Mount Everest. "I don't know what you want from me," he snapped. "I told you from the start. I'm not helping your mom. So why are we even talking about this again? Now think about this for a moment. If your spouse looked you dead in the eyes and said that about your dying parent, how would you react? Could you hold your tongue?" Natalie tried. For weeks she tried. But as the months passed, 2, then 3, Carter's attitude only grew colder. He grumbled about everything. The house, the mood, the atmosphere. He acted like living in that home was a sacrifice worthy of sainthood. His presence became a daily storm cloud. Natalie had no space to grieve, no room to express herself. The pressure, the silence, it was crushing her. And then, as it always does, life made the decision for her. Diane's health collapsed faster than anyone expected. The doctors admitted her to the hospital. Natalie stayed by her side every day for 5 days. On the 6th morning, Diane passed away peacefully in her sleep. Even though Natalie had seen it coming, the shock was still overwhelming. Her brother flew in from Denver with his family, and her kids came home, ready to help. And they did. But in moments like that, what you want, what you need, is your spouse. Carter, meanwhile, stood off to the side, whispering and laughing with his parents, like they were at a barbecue instead of a funeral plan. Natalie's brother stepped up and took charge of the arrangements. Thanks to him, everything came together. But when it came time for the funeral service itself, a fresh cut opened up. They were preparing to enter the chapel, and Natalie turned to Carter. "I want you to sit with me, in the family section." He shook his head. "I'm fine back here," he said casually. "I'm not really a blood relative anyway." She blinked at him, stunned. "You're my husband," she replied, voice tight. That's when Marlene, Carter's mother, chimed in. "Yes, but he's not her son, Natalie. Carter's your husband, not Diane's. Have you ever had your heart drop without warning?" That's what it felt like. her own in-laws making it clear they saw her mother's death as someone else's burden. Where Natalie came from, husbands were expected to sit beside their wives during family services. Even if it wasn't universal, it was the respectful thing to do. And sure enough, guests started to notice. Relatives whispered. A few even approached later to ask if she and Carter had separated. All of that could have been avoided with a simple gesture of support. But it never came. The funeral went on, and Natalie said her goodbyes, surrounded by her brother, her children, and family. Carter and his parents returned to the house with her afterward, acting like nothing had happened. "Thanks for coming," Natalie said politely, trying to stay composed, especially with everything going on. Marlene gave a small laugh. "Yes, well, first your father, now your mother. These funerals are really hitting our wallets." "What do you mean by that?" Natalie asked, stunned. "At least now it's all behind us," Carter's dad added with a shrug. Natalie stared at them both, then smiled weakly and stepped away. Her stomach twisted. From the hallway, she could hear Carter talking to his parents in the kitchen. "It must have been rough living with her moods, huh?" his father asked. "Oh, it was torture," Carter answered. "A husband isn't supposed to just roll over for everything his wife demands. If something doesn't sit right, a man has the right to say no." Natalie clenched her fists, her body frozen in place. The voices, the laughter, they sliced through her. But truth be told, this wasn't new. She had heard the jabs before. When they were first married, Marlene had once told Carter, right in front of her, "You couldn't find someone prettier?" Can you imagine hearing that from your new mother-in-law? So I ask you now, where's the line? When does patience turn into surrender? When do you stop making excuses for someone who clearly stopped caring a long time ago? Because for Natalie, that moment was coming. Fast. Becoming a grandmother someday had always been something Natalie quietly looked forward to. But sitting in her own living room weeks after her mother's funeral, the last thing she expected was to overhear Carter's father joking, "Beauty fades after 3 days," but with Natalie, boredom never sets in. Carter chuckled. She froze, not just because of the words, but because that laugh, it wasn't nervous or forced. It was real, as if mocking her after everything they'd just been through was somehow acceptable. Looking back, Natalie realized something that still stung deeply. Neither Carter nor his parents had offered her a single word of comfort after her father passed. Not one kind gesture, not a single "How are you holding up?" after her mother died. Nothing. Instead, they rolled out jokes and backhanded remarks like confetti. And the worst part? For a long time, Natalie blamed herself. She felt guilty for putting Carter through it, for burdening him with her grief and her dying mother. But now, standing on the other side of that experience, she was finally starting to see things for what they were. What kind of man stands beside you through the vows, only to step back the moment life gets difficult? Let me ask you this, have you ever made excuses for someone so long, you stopped recognizing they didn't deserve them? Natalie had. While Carter and his parents chuckled in the other room, she quietly boiled with a mix of fury and heartbreak. Thank God her brother's family and her kids were still in the kitchen. They didn't hear the conversation. Natalie was grateful she was the only one who overheard it. It was her burden to carry. And then it got worse. Later that evening, Marlene, Carter's mother, walked up to Natalie and asked casually, "Hey, do you mind if I keep this?" She was holding Diane's old handbag. Natalie blinked in disbelief. "Excuse me? I mean, your mom won't need it anymore," she said, glancing at the bag again. "Carter mentioned I could take it. I just thought I'd ask." Can you imagine the gall? The funeral was barely over. Natalie reached out and took the bag from Marlene's hand, her voice firm. "No, you can't have it." The expression on Marlene's face wasn't hurt because of the bag. It was because, for the first time, Natalie had drawn a boundary. She stood her ground. "We're not ready to divide my mom's things. We'll handle her belongings as a family later." Marlene's face turned red. "So now I'm a stranger? You think I don't count?" "You said yourself Carter wasn't really family to my mom," Natalie replied calmly. "So, what does that make you?" Carter and his father, who had overheard. Both shifted uncomfortably. "Let it go, Mom," Carter muttered. But Marlene wasn't done. "It's ridiculous," she huffed. "I raised you better than this. She's poisoning you against your own family." Later that night, Carter came storming into their bedroom. "Why'd you go after my mom like that?" Natalie looked at him, weary. "Why do you keep defending people who treat me like garbage?" They argued. Voices were raised. And for the first time in years, Natalie didn't back down. She told him exactly how she felt. About the funeral. About his absence. About the way his parents dismissed her grief. Carter left the house that night without another word. Days passed. Weeks. He didn't come home. And Natalie didn't go after him. She couldn't. Not this time. And here's the question again, for you listening. Do you always owe someone forgiveness? Even if they've made it clear they don't care about your pain? Natalie wasn't sure. Even if Carter did apologize, could she ever forgive him? Did she even want to? One afternoon, as she was folding laundry, she heard the front door open. She turned and saw him standing there. Carter. Same face. Same stiffness in his shoulders. "Welcome back," she said simply, suppressing the anger rising in her chest. He looked around awkwardly, then pulled something from his jacket. An envelope. "I thought maybe a trip would help. Just you and the kids. A change of pace." Inside were vacation vouchers, plane tickets, hotel reservations. Natalie was speechless. Maybe it was the children's idea, or maybe Carter had finally realized just how far things had gone. Either way, tears welled up in her eyes. Not because of the gift, but because for the first time in months, it felt like he'd tried. She called Ryan and Melissa immediately. "Did Dad plan this?" she asked, still stunned. "Wait, what?" "Dad did," Melissa replied. "He said it was your idea. Whether it was Carter's doing or the kids, it didn't matter." For the first time in what felt like forever, Natalie felt seen. And maybe, just maybe, Carter was feeling something too. "It really happened," Natalie said with a quiet laugh as she took the travel vouchers from Carter's hand. She didn't know what to make of it at first, but the gesture, however unexpected, felt like a tiny crack of light through months of darkness. The day of the trip arrived, and Natalie was buzzing with anticipation. An unfamiliar but welcome emotion. "You should enjoy the time away," Carter told her that morning. "I'll stay at my parents' place. I can't be away from home that long anyway. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine." With that, she said goodbye and left. Her kids, Ryan and Melissa, were already waiting. Together, they headed off for a few days of rest and recovery in the scenic hot springs of Colorado. For Natalie, it was more than a getaway. It was a breath of life after months of exhaustion, grief, and conflict. The steam, the quiet, the laughter with her children. It dulled the ache that losing both her parents had left behind. They stayed away nearly a week. When it was time to head back, both of her kids gave her tight hugs before heading off to their respective cities. "That was a good trip," Melissa said with a smile. "We should probably thank Dad. Just this once." Ryan laughed. "He might be planning something. Watch your back." "Don't say that," Natalie joked, trying to keep the tone light. "Maybe he's turning a corner." But deep down, something still felt off. She returned home carrying memories and a flicker of hope. Maybe she and Carter could restart their lives together. Finally rebuild what had cracked during those months of strain. But the moment she stepped onto the property, her heart froze. The house, her childhood home, was gone. She blinked hard, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. The driveway was the same. The big tree by the mailbox still stood. But the house, the walls that had held her family's memories, the roof that had once sheltered 3 generations, it was gone. And then Carter appeared, walking up the driveway like nothing had happened. Behind him were his parents, smiling politely, as if everything was perfectly normal. "What is this?" Natalie asked, her voice trembling. "That burden is finally gone," Carter replied, wearing that same irritating smirk he always wore when he thought he was being clever. "From now on, my parents are going to live here with me." Natalie tried to steady her breath. "What are you talking about?" While you were away, I had the house torn down. That old place was falling apart anyway. It's time for something new. But don't worry. Just bring whatever inheritance you've got, and we'll get things moving." Her stomach dropped. It was all about the inheritance. That was why Carter had agreed to the vacation. That was why he acted nice. It was a distraction. While she was gone, he had bulldozed her past. Natalie felt a surge of emotion so raw it nearly buckled her knees. But instead of tears, laughter escaped her lips. Carter blinked. "Why are you laughing?" His mother leaned in, whispering, "Is she okay? Has she lost it?" Natalie looked them all in the eye. "You really think there's an inheritance? I didn't get a cent. Nothing. There is no money." They stared at her, stunned. "What do you mean?" Carter demanded. "Explain yourself." But she didn't. She owed them nothing. "You can live here alone if you want," she said calmly. "But I won't be part of this anymore." Marlene scowled. "You helped clean your parents' house, but now you won't lift a finger for us? That's not fair. Do you even remember why I moved in here in the first place?" Natalie snapped. "It wasn't to avoid housework. It was to take care of my dying mother. Maybe you missed that. We're family." Marlene shrieked. "No," Natalie said sharply. "We're not." She turned and walked away. "Where are you going?" Carter shouted behind her. She didn't answer. Natalie didn't know where she'd sleep that night, but she knew she couldn't stay a minute longer in that place. She headed straight for a lawyer's office. Tearing down a house wasn't something one person could just decide on. Not when the deed still had her mother's name on it. As the legal process unfolded, the truth came out. Carter's father, who owned a demolition business, had handled the job himself. They had bypassed permits, legal notices, and family consent. They did it quietly, thinking the inheritance would roll in and Natalie would fall in line. But they were wrong. And Natalie? She was just getting started. At that moment I thought, can a family be so cruel? If you also do not believe in what is happening, support the video with a like. It's really important. And write in the comments how you would cope with such a blow. Subscribe. The most painful moment of the whole story is ahead. Natalie never imagined the betrayal would run this deep. Not only had Carter deceived her, he had planned everything in detail. He arranged for demolition equipment, timed it perfectly to line up with her vacation, and even gave her travel vouchers just to get her out of the way. It had all been a setup. And now, sitting in a lawyer's office with tears quietly sliding down her cheeks, she realized just how thoroughly she'd been played. Through stifled sobs, she explained what had happened. The lawyer, a calm, composed woman named Rachel, listened carefully and then nodded. "Carter demolished the house while it was still legally under your late mother's name," she said, folding her hands. "That constitutes criminal property damage. And if we can prove collusion with his father, they could both be held liable." Rachel leaned forward. "We'll begin by demanding a formal apology from Carter and his parents, and then pursue full compensation for the property loss." Natalie wiped her eyes and nodded. The wheels of justice began turning quickly. Within days, Carter called her, furious. "What the hell is this letter?" he shouted over the phone. "Oh, you got it?" Natalie answered calmly. "Well, you did destroy my house, so of course there's going to be a claim for compensation." "Compensation? You're kidding me. We agreed to move into your parents' house. I tore it down because no one was living there. You should be thanking me, not sending legal threats." Natalie almost laughed. "Thank you? For bulldozing the home I grew up in." She raised her voice. "And what inheritance, Carter? You keep talking about this inheritance like it exists. I don't even know what you're talking about." For once, Carter was silent, stunned by her rare display of fury. "The reason I laughed when I saw the house gone," Natalie said, her voice trembling, "was because I already knew there was nothing to inherit. My brother and I had a clear discussion. I told him to keep all the money, all the stocks, everything. I didn't want it. I had the house, that was it. And he insisted I keep it," she continued. "He lived too far away and didn't want the hassle of managing it. That house was supposed to be my space, my safety net. You and your father destroyed it." There was a pause on the line. Well, Natalie said, you've got two choices. Either rebuild the house exactly as it was, or pay the amount stated in the legal letter. And if not, I will press criminal charges. Carter tried to backpedal. I didn't think you'd be this angry. I was trying to help. My dad regrets it too. Oh, he regrets it now? Then sign the agreement. Natalie snapped and hung up. That was the beginning of the end. Carter started calling constantly, leaving messages filled with apologies and offers to talk. But Natalie had heard enough. The house was gone, and so was the last sliver of trust she had left. She explained everything to her brother and kids. Her brother, while furious about the house being demolished without his consent, promised to stay out of legal matters but support her emotionally. Her daughter, Melissa, was outraged and vocal. He destroyed Grandma's home. He doesn't deserve forgiveness. It had been over a month. Carter still hadn't paid a dime or made good on any settlement. He had disappeared again, silent and absent. Natalie was staying temporarily with Melissa but couldn't stay there forever. She needed those funds to secure a place of her own and rebuild her independence. And just when she thought the drama had reached its peak, something completely unexpected happened. One afternoon, Melissa was scrolling through her phone when she gasped. Mom, look at this. She held up her phone and pointed to an online marketplace ad. The listing showed a handmade apron, one that looked exactly like the one Natalie had crafted for her mother years ago. Natalie stared. That can't be. It is. I swear it's hers, Melissa said. You made this for Grandma. I remember. Natalie's heart pounded. That apron had been unique. She had sewn it by hand, customized the pockets, added a monogram. There was no mistaking it. Who would sell it? She whispered. Where did they get it? They checked the seller's profile. It was a new account, barely a week old. Someone had gone through her mother's belongings, without permission, and was selling them online. Can you believe that? So let me ask you, how much betrayal can a person endure before they stop turning the other cheek? Because for Natalie, that line had been crossed. And now, it was her turn to fight back. Natalie opened the online marketplace app again, scrolling through the listings with a sinking feeling in her chest. No reviews, no transactions, just nearly 50 items posted under a blank profile, and every single one of them belonged to her late mother. The tea set, the handmade quilts, her mother's antique brooch collection. Natalie knew immediately who was behind it. There was only one person who had access to her mother's belongings after the house was demolished. Carter. She called him instantly. What is this app? She demanded. What app? Carter replied, feigning confusion. Do not play dumb with me. You're selling my mother's belongings without permission. Take the listings down now. Carter stammered, clearly rattled. It wasn't me. I swear. Then who? Natalie snapped. Because you're the only one who had the opportunity. I'm coming over. She grabbed her keys and turned to her daughter. Melissa, let's go. They drove straight to Carter's parents' house. As they pulled up, Carter appeared at the door, looking like a deer in headlights. Where are my mother's things? Natalie said firmly. I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered. But he avoided eye contact. Melissa stepped forward. Dad, tell the truth. Are you really selling Grandma's things? He looked at the ground. Carter's parents, hearing the commotion, came outside. Marlene smiled brightly at the sight of her granddaughter. Oh, Melissa, what a nice surprise. Melissa didn't smile back. Grandma, tell Dad to stop lying, she said. He's selling Grandma Diane's things. That's not okay. And that's when Marlene laughed. It was a soft, breathy chuckle, as if Melissa had just said something adorable. Oh, sweetheart, she said cheerfully. That wasn't Carter. That was me. Natalie froze. The blood drained from her face. Melissa's eyes went wide. Carter stood there silently, his face pale. I've been listing the items, Marlene continued, completely unbothered. It's a lot of work, you know, taking the photos, writing the descriptions. But it's kind of fun. Natalie could barely speak. Marlene, she said slowly, those things aren't yours. You had no right. They were just sitting there, Marlene replied, brushing it off. And honestly, it's a great hobby. Keeps my brain sharp, helps fight dementia. I'm the only grandma Melissa has now. Don't you want me to stay healthy? Can you believe that? Stealing from her dead daughter-in-law's estate and calling it therapy. Melissa had tears in her eyes. Grandma, please stop. That stuff means something to us. But Marlene just shrugged. I'm using what I can. Selling the rest. I need a little pocket money. What's the harm? Natalie's voice trembled with restraint. If you won't do the right thing on your own, then I'll do it for you. Melissa, we're leaving. But Mom. No. This won't be solved with words. They drove straight to the local police station. Natalie hadn't originally intended to press charges over the house. But this was different. This was theft. She explained everything to the officer on duty. By the next morning, Marlene's marketplace account was banned. All listings were removed. On the way home, Natalie called Carter. I shut your mom's account down, she said. I filed a report. Were you in on this? Or just sitting by again? What? No. Natalie, please don't do this. We're family. Just withdraw the complaint. Family? She said sharply. You bulldozed my home, sold my mother's belongings, and never once apologized or paid a cent in damages. You want to talk about family? Carter was quiet. Natalie sighed. I'm not a monster. I still care about you. In some strange way after all these years. But that doesn't mean I'm letting this go. I'll wait for the compensation. But I'm not forgiving theft. There was a pause. Then Carter said something unexpected. My dad's not doing well. He's been in and out of the doctor's office. He's not the same. Then maybe he should have spent more time honoring my mother's memory instead of destroying it. She ended the call. Back home, Natalie sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted and shaken. Her childhood home was gone. Her mother's keepsakes had nearly been lost forever. And the people who should have stood beside her? They had been the ones swinging the hammer. So here's the question. At what point does the damage go too far to fix? Because for Natalie, that moment had already come and gone. There was something haunting about how thin Carter's father had become. Not just frail, he looked hollow. His skin had taken on a dusky hue that did not seem natural, and his words were few and far between. But somehow, no one in that family seemed to notice. Marlene was too busy hawking stolen heirlooms online, and Carter was still treating Natalie with that familiar, cold detachment. Compassion? Empathy? Those things had no place in that household. Then, out of nowhere, Carter's father called her, expecting kindness. Natalie answered with a chill in her voice. What is this about? He launched into a bizarre rant about protecting his family from her influence. I'm checking into the hospital, he said with irritation. Not because I'm weak like your parents, but because I need treatment. Don't assume I'm frail or dying. I'm not like them. His tone was sharp, his words condescending. Natalie felt the fury rise in her chest. You're seriously comparing yourself to my parents. After everything you've done? You don't get to speak about them like that. She hung up, and a few days later, the man who had once barked about his strength and longevity was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Carter called in a panic. My dad's dying, Natalie. He has cancer. Stage 4. What do I do? Natalie almost laughed. But there was no humor in it. You mean the same man who said he wasn't weak like my parents? Sounds like you're on your own now. How can you be so heartless? Carter snapped. Did you comfort me when my mother was in hospice? Did your parents lift a finger during the funerals? Think about that before calling me cruel. She ended the call. Carter's father passed soon after. Natalie did not feel hatred, but she could not summon tears either. Too much had happened. Too many lines had been crossed. The will came as a surprise. Despite all his bravado about not needing to plan for death, Carter's father had prepared everything. The house was left to Eric. The rest of the assets were divided between Carter and his mother. Natalie stared at the paper. Eric? He had always shown Eric favoritism, even suggesting they should live together someday. Now, even in death, he was trying to control things from beyond. She sat down with Eric. You don't have to take the house. It's a burden, especially with the estate taxes. If it's too much, walk away. But Eric smiled. I want to keep it, Mom. Feels right. Marlene, of course, was thrilled. Well, he's our heir now, she exclaimed, as if the inheritance made her matriarch by default. Natalie nodded slowly. She was happy for Eric, but something in her heart ached, as if she was losing him all over again. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Carter called her one afternoon. You need to come over. Now. Natalie arrived to find a demolition crew outside Marlene's home. Bulldozers. Dump trucks. The house was halfway torn down. Carter and Marlene stood outside, stunned. What the hell is going on? Carter yelled. This is our house. Eric stepped into view, arms crossed, watching the destruction with a calm expression. You don't get to scream now, he said. You tore down Mom's house without asking. You stole her peace. Now you know how it feels. Carter's face turned ghostly white. Eric, stop this. Please. No, Eric said firmly. Did you apologize when you hurt Mom? Did you show any regret? The machines roared on, tearing through the last of the roof. Carter and Marlene dropped to their knees, helpless. That moment, Natalie would never forget it. Not out of spite, but because it was the first time justice finally felt real. Eric paid the compensation Natalie was owed, using his inherited funds. He even tracked down the stolen items Marlene had listed and returned them all, neatly boxed with a quiet, "You can always count on me and Melissa, Mom." Natalie cried, not out of sadness, but because someone had finally done the right thing. As for Carter and Marlene, with no house and no savings, they moved back into the company-provided apartment. The very one Natalie and Carter had shared before. But now it was theirs alone, and the subject of plenty of office gossip. Natalie told the truth to a trusted coworker's wife. The full story. Carter and his mom will have a rough time now, she said. But that's the bed they made. Months passed. Eric got engaged. He planned to build a new house on the same land where the old family home had once stood. They sold the property for a fair price, and for the first time, Natalie felt peace. Melissa extended a warm invitation to move in. But Eric's fiancée was especially kind. Your family, she said. You're welcome anytime. Natalie eventually accepted the offer. Living with them felt like a new chapter, a chance to start again. She often thought to herself, this time, I will not become the kind of mother-in-law I once feared. They destroyed her home, but they didn't break her. And now she is building a new life with new people without the old pain. Do you want to know how her fate will turn out next? Then subscribe so you don't miss the sequel. And write in the comments, who was the worst character in this story for you?